Well, it's a D-Day for Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, and all eyes are on the White House. Polling stations have opened across more than 25 states in the United States. Millions of Americans are casting their ballots to elect their next president. With polling underway, Harris and Trump each need at least 270 electoral votes to win. The battleground states of Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin are expected to be pivotal to the path to victory. Any of these 7 states can potentially swing to either the Democrats or Republicans. They hold the keys to the presidency. Arizona has 11 electoral votes and its polls close at 9 p.m. ET. Trump won Arizona in 2016 but then lost it narrowly to President Biden in 2020. Georgia has 16 electoral votes. Trump won the state in 2016, but in 2020, Biden beat him by fewer than 12,000 votes. The first time a Democratic candidate had won the state since Bill Clinton in 1992. Allegations that Trump and more than a dozen allies engaged in a criminal conspiracy to overturn Georgia's 2020 results are now at the center of an election interference case. But Trump has denied any wrongdoing. Michigan's 15 electoral votes went to Trump in 2016 after almost 3 decades of supporting Democrats for president. The state flipped in 2020 with Biden taking the state. Michigan is part of the so-called blue wall of Midwestern states considered crucial for Democrats. Now, shifting focus to Nevada, it has voted Democratic for the past 4 presidential elections. With 6 electoral votes, Nevada has the smallest total of the 7 presidential battleground states. North Carolina is still dealing with the devastating aftermath of Hurricane Helene, and both candidates have visited since the storm. Democrats have won the state's 16 electoral votes only twice since 1968, which is the most recently in 2008, when voters backed Barack Obama. Trump edged out Biden in the state in 2020 by a little more than 1 point. Pennsylvania, with its 19 electoral votes, is a critical battleground for Harris and Trump. Biden took the state in 2020, while Trump won there in 2016. Now, Harris and Trump have visited the state at least 20 times each in the months leading up to the elections. Wisconsin voters have backed Democrats for decades until 2016, when Trump flipped the state and secured its 10 electoral votes. Voters swung back in 2020 when Biden won the state. The state was decided by less than 1% in the last 2 elections. VOA correspondent Jessica Stone joined us earlier from Arlington in Virginia with this report. Listen in.
Well, this is increasingly a very blue state. So if you look behind me, you can see that there is no Donald Trump sign here at this polling location. Most of these candidates are Democrats, and you can also see that Harris wall sign. So the excitement here in Northern Virginia is very typical of major urban areas around the country, which are much more Democratic leaning. People here are excited to have an end to the election season. They're very nervous about a return of Donald Trump because many of them work in the city and were impacted by those policies. And then, of course, there are the constituents that are and will vote for Donald Trump, even in Northern Virginia. But the majority of the electorate here is decidedly left-leaning and Democratic.
Joining us live now from Washington, D.C. is Raymond E. Vickery, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Trade Development and Senior Associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Thanks for joining us on the show, Raymond. Now, Raymond, the U.S. economy is one of the key election issues Americans will be voting on the basis of. The outcome of the elections will influence the U.S. foreign policy, trade agreements, and, of course, the defense strategies and global markets. Trump has spoken about putting tariffs on imports, has spoken about imposing higher tariffs on imports from China and the rest of the world. Experts point to a rise in inflation should he win. Now, Harris's policies sounding more status quo, have spoken of continued support to Ukraine, NATO, Israel and Taiwan. How do you view the impact of either candidate becoming the next U.S. president on the U.S. trade policy overall? A brief overview.
Well, thanks very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on the World is One network because I'm a believer in the WION approach. I think that there is a very definite difference between what will happen with a Trump presidency and what will happen with a Harris presidency in regard to international economics. Unfortunately, the Trump approach is to be in love with tariffs. And he has said that he is going to provide a 10 to 20% tariff across the board on friends, adversaries alike, regardless of what happens. The idea that you can build an economic fortress America and not have relations which are not driven by tariffs in regard to such great democracies as India and the United States is simply wrong. And if that happens, it will have an effect on U.S.-India relations. It'll have an effect on U.S. relations with all of our friends and partners across the world. This is not a way in which to build prosperity. America must compete and not retreat if it is going to succeed as a source of stability and economic growth across the world. I think the Harris approach is much more in keeping with what the interest of the United States and great democracies like India have. And that is one of friend sourcing. And that is, what can you do to be able to move the international supply chains from authoritarian nations like China and Russia to friends such as India. And you have seen this already in the Biden administration, and I think Harris administration will have a continuation of that, of trying to work with our friends and partners to build not just geopolitical stability, but economic stability. It's absolutely wrong to think that these two areas are not connected. Some people will say, well, you can do whatever you want in regard to international economics, but we can still be able to stand together on geopolitical stability. That's just not right. The fact is that these are connected, and the approach of a Trump administration in building an international economic fortress America will redound to the detriment of the United States and the average worker really across the world. So I think there's a very grave and real difference here, and one would hope that the Harris approach will prevail.
Raymond, you spoke of the India-US relationship. Now, the US is a leading investor in India, particularly in technology, infrastructure, renewable energy and manufacturing sectors. If you could just extrapolate a little more on how you suppose the election outcome will impact the India-US bilateral ties in defense, trade and other strategic sectors.
Yes, I'd be happy to. The Trump approach, as you saw from the first administration, is a transactional approach. And that is, he's a real estate developer and an entertainer, and it's really a zero-sum game. I've got to win on a particular contract. And if you don't do as I say, I'm going to slap higher tariffs on you, as he did on aluminum and steel. The Biden administration took those tariffs and basically said, well, we may not be able to repeal it completely, but in regard to India, we're going to really disregard it and give India a pass. And that economic relationship has grown. I think it's particularly important in the area of tech transfer. The United States is still the place where innovation, technology takes place. India is a great reservoir of technology talent. And so there's an obvious complementary relationship there, which is win-win for both sides. It's not a question of the United States is going to win, the U.S. is going to lose, and we're going to each see how much we can get out of it. So I think the approaches are very different and will significantly impact the U.S.-India relationship because, as I said earlier, you can't just wall off the economic relationship from a political. In fact, they go hand in hand. One may influence more than the other at any particular time, but there's only one reality, and that is economics and politics must go forward to some degree together.
Thank you so much, Raymond E. Vickery, for your time and for your invaluable inputs on the broadcast today.
Oh, my pleasure.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.